I am so grateful to be back home. Thank you for all your prayers, and please continue to pray for those who are simply living their daily lives when war arrived at their doorstep. It is a deeply vulnerable position to be in. That vulnerability became especially real to me as I traveled home after Israeli airspace closed following the missile attack. The 10-day tour of Israel was a gift from my parents, who booked it through Pilgrim Tours, a company that specializes in Christian group travel. We enjoyed 2 full days sightseeing in northern Israel before the pilgrimage was interrupted by war. We saw the geography where Jesus grew up and carried out much of his ministry. One discussion at Tel Dan was especially relevant. Standing on the bluff overlooking the borders between Israel, Lebanon, and Syria, beside trenches dug by Syrian troops during the Six-Day War, our guide, Mickey, spoke about Israel's ongoing tensions with its neighbors. The moment underscored that living with war on one's doorstep is part of life in Israel. In less than 24 hours, I began to understand that reality firsthand. The morning of February 28th started as expected, but as our bus drove into Golan Heights above the Sea of Galilee, everyone's phones simultaneously sounded an emergency message. When we arrived at the ruins of the city of Hippos, we learned that all national parks had closed. The war had started, Mickey said, and the possibility that always shadows travel in this region became our reality. As we headed back to Tiberias, I saw a pop in the sky. Later, I would learn it was the Iron Dome intercepting a missile likely headed for Tel Aviv or Jerusalem. If I had checked my email before we left that morning, I would have seen an emergency situation warning, an evacuation offer from Pilgrim Tours, and later that afternoon, a U.S. Department of State notice about periodic airspace closures. Despite this, I still hoped things would blow over and I would still get to see Jerusalem. Instead, alerts sounded all day, and we passed the time moving between playing cards in our hotel room and a shelter that was cramped and uncomfortable, with so little space that some of us spilled into the hallway outside. My dad went once and chose not to go back, instead watching the pops in the sky and missiles pass by. On March 1st, a shelter-in-place was issued for Jerusalem, and the tour company decided we would leave Israel by land. We drove from Tiberias to Eilat along the Jordan River Valley east of the West Bank, and we saw the landscape change from lush green hillsides of Galilee to desert sand. Most places were closed, but we were fortunate to find a few convenient stops. We were unaware, as we traveled, of the missiles that hit Jerusalem, Beit Shemesh, and Tel Aviv. Tourists could exit Israel through 4 land crossings, 3 into Jordan, and 1 into Egypt at Eilat Taba, while the borders with Gaza, Lebanon, and Syria remain heavily restricted. The Ministry of Tourism reported about 37,400 tourists in Israel this day, and many of them headed to Eilat Taba. Mickey left us here, and we were to meet our Egyptian guide at this roundabout. It sounds simple, but this quarter mile may have been the most stressful of our entire journey. It made clear how much we had relied on Mickey's guidance and leadership. Our group of 23 had met only 3 days earlier, and we had not yet become a community. There was a family of 4, 2 groups of 3, 6 pairs, and 1 solo traveler. We were loosely assembled. With no formal introductions, we got to know each other piecemeal. Even in calm conditions, keeping 23 people together is difficult. Now add luggage, passport checks, multiple payment windows, body and baggage screening, and crowds of people speaking different languages as they tried to leave a country at war. Photographs were not allowed. Because we are traveling as a group, the Egyptian clerks required us to present our passports together and make group payments. Across 4 separate stops, we had to produce some combination of passports, receipts, or cash payments totaling $58 per person, payable only in U.S. dollars. Handing your passport over to someone you barely know in this situation is an act of faith. Keeping the group together was difficult from the moment we stepped off the bus. Some moved slowly with their luggage, others were delayed at security. One woman in our group, a mother of 7, had a gift for hurting people, and we learned to form a visual chain to keep track of one another. A multilingual group member helped us navigate the communication barriers, while one more kept our Egyptian guide updated so he would not leave before we got through. This crossing took nearly 2 hours, though honestly, it felt longer. I am grateful we trusted each other and worked together. The Eilat Taba border was the transition that made our group a community, and we only lost a pocket knife and a pair of expensive binoculars. We stayed the night in Taba. 2 hours after we arrived, we heard 2 booms that shook the glass. Later, we learned that there had been an incident that closed the crossing for 6 hours. Because of the threat of terrorists, we could not take the most direct route across the Sinai Peninsula. Instead, we traveled a longer but safer road that passed about 50 miles from a possible location of Mount Sinai and St. Catherine's Monastery. The land is truly barren. Seeing it gave me a new appreciation for Israel's 40 years in the wilderness and for the fact that their survival depended entirely on God's provision. Along the way, I took a great deal of video footage as a way of bearing witness to this manifestation of God's care, something I confess I had not fully grasped until I saw the landscape with my own eyes. There were many checkpoints. Some felt casual, with guards who had taken off their Kevlar vest and smoked. Others were more serious, with armed guards standing behind barriers. At one point, a particularly intimidating guard saw me holding my phone. After a great deal of yelling, I surrendered my phone and told him to just delete everything. He scrolled through my photos and videos of the coast and laughed. Then he showed another guard who also laughed. And then he returned the phone. In the end, it was no big deal, but it was frightening in that moment. We went through a tunnel under the Suez Canal and stayed in Cairo. Since most of us had at least one day before our flight, Pilgrim arranged for a day of sightseeing where we went to the Grand Egyptian Museum and the Great Pyramids, which was a bit of a letdown since you can no longer get close to the monuments. Friends have asked me if I was afraid during this experience, and I really wasn't. I believe that God was present with us through the danger, just like he was present with the Israelites in the wilderness. The history of the Israelites has never been free from conflict. Yet even today, when they greet and depart from one another, they say, Shalom. On the surface, shalom means peace. But peace is more than the absence of war or stress. Shalom goes deeper. In Hebrew, it carries a sense of wholeness, safety, and completeness. Paul closes a letter with this blessing. Now may the Lord of peace himself give you peace at all times and in every way. To have shalom with God is to know an inward fullness and safety, even when the world outside is in chaos. I went on this pilgrimage hoping to draw closer to God. Through the worst-case scenario of war's outbreak, I experienced something deeper than I had expected. Shalom.